Hello everyone, I am Ricky Williams and this is Sunday School Class with Ricky. I want to welcome you, particularly if you are visiting for the first time to our Sunday School class. Welcome, and I trust that you will find it interesting. And of course, for those of you who have come back, who stayed with us, I really appreciate it. Welcome as well, and I hope you have been enjoying this series as we continue looking at historical and biblical characters. So as you may know, we are currently in a series we are calling Bible Biographies. And in fact, we are coming to the end of the series. This will be our penultimate lesson in this series. So yes, just one more to go after this. For the past several weeks, we have been studying the biographies of some persons who are mentioned in the Bible and who are also attested to by secular records. In today's class, we'll be studying the lives of the father and son duo of Herod Agrippa I and Herod Agrippa II, who are mentioned in the book of Acts. Now, you're probably saying to yourself, you have not seen those names as I outlined them just now in the book of Acts, and so it may be a bit confusing for you. Most Bibles don't mention those two men by those names. However, in Acts chapter 12, Herod Agrippa I is mentioned, but he is just referred to as Herod. Whereas in Acts 25 and 26, we have Herod Agrippa II, but he is just referred to as Agrippa. So nevertheless, we know from historical records that these names that I have outlined are actually their official names. So these two men, Herod Agrippa I and II, were the last two of the powerful Herodian Dynasty of Israel. That dynasty, as you will know, started with King Herod the Great in around 37 BC. So he's the King Herod of the Christmas story, you know, that killed all of the newborn boys. And the dynasty ended with Agrippa II, who we'll talk about shortly, around 100 AD. Now, history tells us about many great and powerful dynasties. In Britain, we know of the Tudors and the Stuarts and the Plantagenets. In China, we've heard of the Ming and the Han dynasties. In Russia, we know of the Romanovs. And in Israel, we know of the Hasmonean dynasty, also known as the Maccabees, and then the Herodians. There's one thing that is common to all these dynasties that I just mentioned, which is they all eventually came to an end. And so as we consider today the ending of the Herodian dynasty, let's study together. So let's look now at the biblical account, starting with King Agrippa I, also known as Herod Agrippa I, also just referred to as Herod in Acts chapter 12. Now, Agrippa I was the grandson of Herod the Great and the son of Aristobulus IV. He ruled Judea as king from 41 to 44 AD. Now, he is mentioned in the book of Acts in Acts chapter 12. And this is what we are told about him in Acts 12. He is noted specifically for his persecution of the early Christian church. We are told that he ordered the execution of James. This is James, the son of Zebedee, the brother of John. And when he saw that that pleased the Jews, he imprisoned Peter as well, just to continue to curry favor with the Jews at the time. Now, you know the dramatic story, as we are told there in the book of Acts. Peter escapes prison dramatically with the assistance of an angel from God. And everyone is confused by Peter's sudden disappearance. But after Peter's escape is discovered, Herod had the guards interrogated and then executed. After this, we're told that Herod leaves Judea and goes to Caesarea, and we're told that he remains there. In Acts 12 and 20-23, we are further told about some stuff about Herod Agrippa I. We're told that he was displeased there with the people of Tyre and Sidon. Not 100% sure why, but obviously there was some conflict there between him and Tyre and Sidon. So he was displeased with them. However, because he was the king and quite powerful, the people from Tyre and Sidon, I guess they sent representatives to come to him to make some kind of reconciliation with him and to make peace, because they depended on him for their financial support. So on a particular day, we are told that Herod put on his royal robes and sat on his throne and made a great speech. And he was indeed known for being a very fluent speaker. The people who heard him were quite impressed with his speaking, with his oratory skills. And we are told in verse 22 there in Acts chapter 12, it says there, "And the people gave a great shout, saying, 'It is the voice of a God and not of a man.'" Herod obviously reveled in this praise and obviously felt quite proud of himself. But we're told then in verse 23 that he is struck dead by an angel of God. Verse 23 says, "And immediately the angel of the Lord smote him, because he gave not God the glory, and he was eaten of worms and gave up the ghost." So he was struck dead because of his pride and because of him accepting the praise and worship of people as though he was a god. So that's the biblical account there as found in Acts chapter 12. Now we do have some historical sources, some secular references to this king, Agrippa I, also known as Herod. So Josephus, as you've heard me mention and quote several times already in this series, in his book, The Antiquities of the Jews, provides a detailed account of Agrippa I's life. He confirms his royal lineage, being descended from Herod the Great. It also talks about some political maneuvering and his popularity among the Jews. Obviously, after having James executed, he was quite popular. Josephus also describes Agrippa's death in very similar terms to that which we find in the book of Acts. And Josephus also attributed it to some form of divine retribution for his acceptance of godlike honors. So we're told about Agrippa I in his early life. He spent much of his youth in Rome. Again, quite privileged. He was the grandson of Herod the Great and the son of Aristobulus. So he was quite privileged. And so he was able to go off to Rome and spend a lot of his youth there. And there, he cultivated friendships with very influential people, specifically Caligula, who became an emperor, and Claudius, who also became an emperor. And Herod became very good friends with them, particularly with Caligula. Now, these connections became very crucial for his later rise to power. Agrippa ran into some difficulties in his youth, primarily financial difficulties, and also because he was suspected of being involved in a plot to overthrow the then emperor Tiberius. And he was actually imprisoned for a short while. But then, after Tiberius died, his close friend, this is Herod's close friend, Caligula, became emperor. And so, of course, Caligula freed him, and it is in 37 AD. And Caligula then granted him the title of king over the territories that were previously held by his uncle Philip and Lysanias. So he is now being freed from prison and sent back to Judea, to Israel, as king over certain territories, not of the entire area. Later, Claudius, after Caligula had died, Claudius expanded Agrippa's rule to include Judea and also Samaria, effectively restoring the kingdom of his grandfather, Herod the Great. Agrippa was adept at balancing his loyalty to Rome with his popularity among the Jewish people. He observed Jewish customs, participated in religious festivals, and supported the temple, which earned him, of course, great favor with the Jewish population. At the same time, he was sure to to maintain strong ties with the Roman authorities. However, we are also told by secular sources that Agrippa was involved in the persecution of Christians. In Acts 12, we are told of his political maneuvering, which is evident in his persecution of the early church. We saw that already, and we saw that by arresting and executing the Christian leaders, he sought to solidify his popularity with the Jewish religious establishment. Also, this is from Josephus, Agrippa's acceptance of divine honors, in other words, being praised as a god, led to his sudden death. So this is again given in Acts and also given in Josephus, and both of them said that it was divine retribution. So Agrippa the first ruled Judea from 41 to 44 AD, and he died in Caesarea in 44 AD. What was Agrippa's legacy? Well, from the Bible, he is remembered as a persecutor of the early church and a ruler whose pride led to his ultimate end due to divine judgment. Historically, he is seen as a politically astute king who managed to unite much of his grandfather's territory and maintain favor with both Rome and the Jewish population. His sudden death marked the end of the Herodian Dynasty's direct rule over Judea. And the stories that we have had from history included not only Josephus, but also there is some mention of Agrippa in the works of Tacitus and Suetonius. Now let's look at the life of Herod Agrippa II, also just referred to in the Bible as Agrippa. So King Agrippa II was the son of Agrippa I, who we just talked about, and he was the last of the Herodian kings. He ruled parts of northern Palestine, but not in Judea itself, and his rule was an extremely long one, from about 50 to about 100 AD, 50 years of ruling. But remember, he did not actually become king of Judea itself, mainly in northern Palestine area. So Agrippa II, just called Agrippa, it appears in Acts chapters 25 and 26. He is present at the trial of the Apostle Paul in Caesarea alongside his sister Berenike, who we spoke about in the last class. So Paul, during this trial, appeals to Agrippa's knowledge of Jewish customs and prophecies. And after Paul's preaching towards him, Agrippa famously remarks, "Almost thou persuadest me to be a Christian." That's Acts 26 and 28. In Acts, Agrippa is portrayed as knowledgeable about Jewish law and customs. He listens sympathetically to Paul, but he remained uncommitted about Christianity. His political acumen is evident in his ability to navigate the complex religious and political landscape of first century Palestine. Now let's look at what we have on Agrippa II from the historical sources. And again, our main source is Josephus in his works, The Antiquities of the Jews and in the Jewish War. So Josephus provides extensive information about Agrippa II's reign, his political alliances, and his involvement in the events leading up to the Jewish revolt, which we know took place from 66 to 70 AD. We are told by Josephus that Agrippa tried to mediate between the Jews and the Romans, but ultimately he sided with Rome. He was appointed king by the Roman Emperor Claudius around 50 AD, but his authority was limited compared to his father's. He was given control over the region of Chalcis and later expanded to other northern territories, but not Judea. During the Jewish revolt, Agrippa played a significant role as a mediator. He mediated between the Jewish population and the Roman authorities. He tried to persuade the Jews to avoid rebellion, but ultimately he sided with the Romans when the revolt broke out. Agrippa maintained close ties with Roman officials and spent time in Rome after the destruction of Jerusalem. His loyalty to Rome ensured his survival and his continued influence even as the Herodian Dynasty was coming to an end. Both historians Tacitus and Suetonius mentioned Agrippa II in the context of the Jewish revolt, and they mentioned his presence in Rome after the destruction of Jerusalem. And so Agrippa II ruled from 50 AD until his death around estimated 93 to 100 AD. And the details of his death are not very well known, but it is speculated to be around 100 AD. Agrippa II's legacy. From the Bible, Agrippa is remembered for his encounter with Paul, and is also recognized for his knowledge of Jewish law and prophecy. He is portrayed as open-minded, but ultimately non-committal towards Christianity. From a historical perspective, his legacy is mixed. He is seen as a mediator who failed to prevent the Jewish revolt, and he's seen as the last Herodian ruler, marking the end of that dynasty's influence in Palestine. And again, our sources for this information is Josephus, Antiquities of the Jews and the Jewish War, and also we have works of Tacitus and Suetonius. Now, what is today's lesson? I've noticed that in recent times, in these classes and in these summaries, I have been speaking a lot about people who are in positions of power and who tend to abuse that power, or who tend to act in a way that suggests that they think that they will always maintain power. And maybe I'm doing that because at the time that these videos are being produced, there are things happening in the world around us where we see a lot of this sort of thing happening with people who are in power, who are seeking to abuse that power as though they believe they will continue to maintain power forever. And one thing we learn from today's lesson as we consider the last two kings of the Herodian dynasty is that nothing lasts forever. And in particular, these dynasties where people are powerful and have lots of say in what's going on, those dynasties don't last forever. And I, at the beginning of the class, mentioned a few dynasties that we would know historically, and all of them came to an end. They don't exist today. And so persons who are in positions of authority, who seem to think and act that they will always be in those positions of authority, are mistaken, because these positions do not last forever. And so one day, these people who are currently in power, that will come to an end, one way or the other. And so I want to use that thought to encourage those who may be feeling a bit discouraged by what they see happening around them. They might feel, oh boy, this is really terrible. It's not going to last forever. And then for those of us who might believe that we have some position of power and authority, just remember that we need to be humble and to recognize that our position of authority won't always be the case. And so we need to recognize that we have to be answerable to God as well. And so I want to encourage you, whatever your situation, if you are one who is in some type of position of authority, whatever that position may be, whether it be just at the workplace, you are a manager, a supervisor, someday that will come to an end. You will retire, sometime it will come to an end. So don't act as though you will always be in a position of power. And again, for those of you who might feel you are being persecuted because of some other person above you, then there's hope in that you can realize that, again, that person will not always be in power. Now, we can always do anything about other people's behavior. We can only address our own. And so I want to encourage you once again to remember to look at the example of the Lord Jesus, who was a person who had all power, could do anything, yet he came to be a servant to us. And he was a servant to those who walked with him. He continues to be a servant and to teach us that we too need to have a servant's heart. And so we don't come to be people who are powerful and dominating of others. We are here to follow our Lord's example to be a servant. And that's my encouragement to you as a Christian. Remember, the Lord said that he has come not to be served, but to serve. And so we too should have that same attitude, that we are not here to dominate others, we are here to serve others. That's my challenge to you as a Christian. And of course, my challenge continues to be for those of you who might be watching who have not yet given your life to the Lord Jesus Christ. They're going to understand that he wants you to do so, because that's the most important thing that you can do in this life. And so I encourage you to trust in him. For those who come to him, he will in no ways cast out. He will never turn you away. So trust in him today. All right, next class is our 12th and final class of this series. Don't worry, of course, we'll be coming with another series shortly thereafter. But next class will be our final one in this particular series. I hope that you have found it interesting so far, and that you look forward to the last class of this series, and that you will enjoy that one as well. So I'll see you for our next class, and until then, may God bless you.